Hey, Geoff, welcome to our discussion. Can you tell us about who you are and a bit about your background and what you're doing?
Sure. Hey, Xabi. Nice to be here. I'm Geoff Baskwill. My pronouns are he and him. I work at a cybersecurity company, which I've been doing for about 5 or 6 years now. Before that, I was working in the telecom industry, still doing software development, but yeah, about probably 20 years before that. So right now, I'm a software architect, and I kind of what that role means is I really just work with teams who are really building the building product, and I try to help them sort of solve problems in ways that they may not have experienced before, right? So I'll look at how they're trying to solve the problem, and get them on the right track, we'll say.
All right. Yeah, I can imagine that software architect has to deal with architecting the code, but it's also architecting the infrastructure, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure you dealing with the cloud on a daily basis. What led you to that? Was it a logical evolution of your role, or was it something that you have always been interested into?
Sure. So it was something that was new to me when I came to this new role, right? So when I came to the new company, I had zero experience with the cloud. It was completely new to me. But they were all in. They were running full tilt towards. Actually, they were already in AWS, and they were building stuff. And so I learned pretty much on the job, made it happen. And there were tons of opportunities that they gave me and tons of expertise that I was able to draw on at the company, to learn how to do things, and that sort of gradually built up to kind of where I am today and being able to help other teams.
That's great. So because you started essentially from zero without necessarily knowing about the cloud, what was the hardest thing to learn about it?
For me, it was really the shift in what you need to care about. Right. So back in my on-premise days, we were really super detailed on, operating system details, and even down to the level of, we made kernel patches, and we did kernel modules and stuff. And we knew a lot about networking, and that's all really useful, and it still has some applicability when depending on where you're doing things in the cloud and how you're doing them. But learning to shift gears and really bring ourselves up a level, and myself and the way that I think about things up a level, and using serverless technologies like Lambda and other tools like that, um, really was a big mind shift, but really a welcome one, right? Like being able to say, you know what, I don't care about those details anymore. All I care about is my business logic. And that's just been amazing.
How this made you feel about things that you've learned in the past that you don't have to do anymore, like, patching servers and upgrading OSs, and because you essentially don't have to do them anymore.
Yeah.
Is there something that you regret of it, or are you fully embracing this new world?
There's a little bit of me. I think I wrote an article a few years back when I was doing my AWS certifications. I was looking at, I think I was doing the networking one at the time, and I was like, this is what I used to do, and I love this stuff. And I was sort of like, but is this wrong for me to care about this? Right? Because it's really, a lot of it is unnecessary. And so you can really leverage the stuff that, like I said, bringing it up a level and saying, all this stuff used to be useful. And yeah, there's a little bit of wistful nostalgia for the good old days of subnet masks and all that sort of thing. But being able to sort of divest of yourself of that and say, you know what, all I need to care about is business logic. That's really nice. So I think the nice outweighs the nostalgia a bit.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I think about them as well, about those kind of new services,
Yeah.
those serverless services. I used to be a developer, but I never really learned about how to configure servers. And when Lambda was out, I was like, this is great because I can actually focus on what I know best, what I do best, and build something. And this was a game changer, especially when, I used to be in traditional IT world where things take time to be provisioned, whereas the cloud can allow you to do this in 5 minutes. So
yeah, exactly.
I love this.
Right? All the stuff that used to take, weeks and months and a long time and a lot of money to rack up and get provisioned. And it's like, you know what, I can make an API call and, I have an instance if I want one, which normally, our teams, we don't anymore. We just say, I want my code to run. And when this thing happens, make this code run. And that's all you need. And it's really mind-blowing. It's really amazing.
Totally. Can't agree more. When, we talk about all this and there is always something that comes to mind is that we're constant learners, constant unlearners and constant learners as well. Is there anything in particular that you're learning today? Is there anything that you want to learn today or learn tomorrow? Something that you're interested in that, you think can have a use in your career?
Yeah. So for me, I've spent a long time doing sort of software development and so for me, I think I have, I shouldn't say this because I'll find out tomorrow that I know nothing. But the thing that I'm really learning about these days is data management and sort of, I hesitate to use the word big data because it has so many different meanings, but that's something that I'm trying to learn about more now is strategies for dealing with large amounts of data and processing it efficiently and doing interesting things with it. That's something that, in my past, I've never had to do. And I'm seeing it come up in my near future. So I'm expecting that I'll have to pull out the books and start learning from the people around me that actually do know how to do this.
Yeah, interesting. When you talk about data, is it the way to store data? Is it the way you process data? What sort of, what is the concern around this data?
So let me put it this way. A lot of what I've done in the last, and I'm going to say it 30, I think it's been 30 years, has been stuff that, you could do easily in memory with a SQL database and do some joins and you're good to go, right? And so that's like tens of megabytes, maybe tens of gigabytes of data total. And when you start talking about real amounts of data, like starting at gigabytes and getting into hundreds of gigabytes and the rates and just so much stuff that you need to deal with and present that to a customer in a meaningful and useful way, right? That is still performant, right? Like I want to be able to give customers a useful response in 100 milliseconds. How do you do that when you've got 100 gigabytes to sift through? I'm learning how to do that.
So. Yeah. And just given the fact that this data just grows exponentially, I think what you're learning today is going to be another learning, in 6 months, 6 years time, and maybe 60 years time, who knows? We're going to still be learning about data. And yes. I find this fascinating.
Yeah.
And out of all you've learned, I'm also like kind of a, veteran. I've learned a lot of things, and the first things that I've learned was HTML. And I learned HTML by looking at the source code of a HTML page and trying to replicate things. Of course, today, learning IT, learning development, learning about technology is much easier.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you would recommend for anyone who wants to learn about the cloud? What are the tools? What are the resources that you personally use or you would recommend to anyone to use?
Sure. So I think before I talk about resources, I think I'd talk about approach, right? It's like I would rather than diving into books and sort of learning a lot of theory before you know what you need, I'd say find a project, right? Whether it's somebody else's project that you want to help out with, or something that an itch that you want to scratch, something that you find interesting. That's how I learn best. Is I take a project that I want to do, I want to learn about. Um, like I want to do it, sort of the canonical one is a to-do list, right? I want to track my to-dos. There's a million apps for that, but it's a good way to learn how to use some of the technologies. Find a problem that you want to solve, and then there's tons of resources like you were asking about. So things like the AWS has a site called serverlessland.com that has a lot of patterns for solving different problems using serverless technologies. They have an amazing resource called the Amazon Builders Library, and I'm sure that I'm not an expert in any of the other clouds, and I would hesitate to call myself an AWS expert even, but I know that there are tons of resources out there that you can just jump in and say, hey, I'd like to learn about how to do this, and Google is your friend. All the search engines will give you tons of information. One other thing, if you are interested in building like simple apps really quickly with AWS, the Amplify toolset is really amazingly awesome. I can get you started in literally 10 minutes building an app, and it'll do all the infrastructure for you and kind of get you started down the right path with the right patterns.
Yeah, I like the approach of finding a project and find a use to the knowledge as opposed to learning for the sake of learning.
Yeah.
Those resources that you're mentioning are great. Yes, you can build applications with SNS and Lambda and DynamoDB, but actually now you have services that allow you to create something without writing a single line of code. So, things are evolving fast, and it's all about providing business value as opposed to just having your hands dirty trying to configure and hook things together. Sometimes things are actually working out of a very simple service. So yeah, absolutely. I like what you're recommending.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point that you brought up, is that as someone who's done software for a long time, I naturally gravitate to sort of a more code-oriented stuff. But there are lots of solutions out there, and AWS has some services as well that basically let you almost drag and drop to create applications, right? And I've never really dug into them, but they look really interesting from sort of a less code perspective.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like code will always be there. There's always going to be coders, but it's true that as the cloud evolves, maybe at some point we'll have to change our minds about it, and it's all going to be more like a descriptive sort of coding, more like infrastructure as code with a bit less logic, and just like, I want the application to do this and that, and I don't want to write any sort of logic. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And or kind of like taking, again, we took a huge step in getting rid of the operating system management and all the lower level management when we started using Lambda and serverless tools. It's like, this is not a new concept of next generation solving problems, but saying, I want to focus even more on my business logic and even less on how it's wired together. Just give me an event that I need to process and let me handle it, and that's 5 lines instead of 500.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Maybe I should mention also, like in terms of finding a practical use to learn about the cloud, I think joining an open source project such as the one we have at Skycrafters, the Responder, is a fantastic way to learn about how it works. Not only learn about the cloud, but also learn about open source and how software is being created. It's not about being an expert. It's about just having the intention of doing it. It sounds hard, but it's not that hard. No one has to be an expert to be contributing to open source. I
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
no, and that's a huge point is like if you don't have an idea that really strikes you, as being super interesting or amazing at the moment, there's tons of people out there looking for help, and a lot of them are really open to external helpers and people coming in and saying, I can do this, or I don't really know where to start, but can you help me? And I know that, the Skycrafters team is really amazingly wonderful. So I know you all would be super welcoming for folks to come in and help out with that.
absolutely. Thank you for these kind words. As a closing word, for our audience, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Absolute best way is to reach out on Twitter. So I'm at Geoff Baskwill. So just first name _ last name. And yeah, you can find me there. And I'm also on Skycrafters, so you can send me a message there too.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Thank you for your time, Geoff. This is much appreciated, and we'll definitely have to do that again. Thank
Yeah,
you so
awesome.
much.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time, Xabi. Talk to you soon.